This is a production of Cornell University.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you very much for introduction. And I'd like to start my the topics and to minimize a technical problem, I use a PDF instead of a PowerPoint. So I have the 5 scripted the major topics and I've already introduced, but I've been with the different international organizations part-time. That's how I continue to work with the international communities, especially with CGR centers, Gene Bank, and also FAO. So my involvement in the past was already introduced, and many people had retired or are still active. And I have the particular interaction with the potato group in the past. Now Dr. Walter Dijon take care of potato group. So in the past, I was working more with the breeding aspect of the so-called the utilization of wild potato genetic resources to introduce its property like the disease and the pest resistances. And with the working with potatoes, and gradually I shifted the incorporating the also transgenic approach. So I have the half of the own genetic resource utilization, half of the application of the some the genetic engineering at the present activities. So here I am. Many of you may know that Tsukuba is nearby Tokyo, and it is the major science city. So we have the local interactions for the technical and the scientific collaboration with the different national and the private institutions. Here I am talking about genetic resources, and there are many textbooks the state the fact genetic resources, but principally I use use of term stated that the FAO International Treaty. And the sum of words, what I have here, sometimes you may not find in glossary or the vocabulary book in textbook that I checked over the several gene bank book, plant genetic resource books, like a land race and accession. So I use with this term over the use here to talk this occasion. So plant genetic resources, how we recognize? Talking about the plants, the plant kingdom, so starting from a single cell the photosynthetic the microorganism to angiosperm, you may count over the 300,000 species, and roughly 80,000 species can be used for human in terms of chewing, biting, spice, and or the staple the food crop. But how many over the 80,000 species used? So locally, like the one specific spot in Japan, maybe we use 300 species year round, and also another the several hundred the harvested. But probably the city people wouldn't use the crops or plants the harvested from nature. So very little number of the species used in proportion to available number at many places, like our case in Japan. And talking about how those over the species invested or dedicated for research, probably less than 100 species have the high intensity activities from research to the production and the markets. So we have a lot of yet potential, although we are talking about a lot of biodiversity loss and the species loss and the monoculture in agriculture. So one of the example of the past several decades that how the one species utilized in other places. So dragon fruit. So this one originally from Mexico, but the popularity went up in Southeast Asia, starting from Vietnam. So the Vietnam benefited a lot by the producing this and exporting this crop to the overseas, especially to some over temperate zone country. So yet at the 21st century, by exploiting the some the species, then introducing into the some place, you may have chance like this. So in case of Mexico, before the Vietnam and the Southeast Asia, the popularized the dragon fruits was the rather the low regarded the species. But now the Mexico also the catch up to produce dragon fruits. So some of the external influence also important for original place where they have those species. Staple crops. Here at Cornell, you have a diversity of background and the origin of nationalities. So you may recognize the fact they are on this photo. And indeed, looking at the understanding of the student at a different countries, sometimes it's not popular. Like you see here, pearl millet, sorghum, and the quinoa. So place to place, they are important, but other places may not be recognized very well. So introducing information materials to one place to other also the valid for promoting the utilization. Indeed, not only availability of materials, so knowledge is important. This was East African cases of how local people use. Of course, not only available are these species, but also how to use always important, including a traditional knowledge. And also talking about common crop like a banana, what we have in the global market is particularly one group of banana, Cavendish group. But looking at those of the supposed to be origin of banana. Actually, origin of banana not yet clear. Maybe in Papua New Guinea, Irian Jaya, or the continent of Southeast Asia. And this case is the Myanmar local banana varieties. You see the diversity of bananas. So this is contrast. Global market principally one group of banana, but looking at the availability of different banana varieties, there are a lot. Indeed, the case of Myanmar already, this is the more than 1 decade ago research using SSR marker on banana and comparing Myanmar collections with the global core collection available from Singapore, and the extent of diversity of Myanmar banana is wide equivalent to the international collections. So place to place, looking at the availability of materials, yet you may find the uniqueness and which can be used and adding up new varieties. So Mexico, I have a lot of involvement. Mexico is one particular country that they have a lot of crop origins and they have supply. And like avocado, the Mexico grow export, it is important, but principally 1-2 varieties like Hass as major variety. And plant breeding, although not much popular in Mexico, but it was brought to Hawaii, and Hawaii made a lot of avocado breeding. So the movement of materials are often important. Like here you see tomato, chili, spicy, the most spicy chili is not in Mexico, probably maybe United States or some part of South Asia. So the higher the capsaicin value, Scoville value, maybe in like some of the Asian countries. So by introducing crops, sometimes they have their own the movement and the improvement and the change. So let me go a little bit on the scientific need. I have been working with the Mexican National Gene Bank and particularly research promotion. And there are a lot of the local crop species that do not have enough background on the botany, especially reproductive biology and cytogenetics, that even common crops the opuntia. This one is a cactus pair. There is the ploidy series diploid to hexaploid, and maybe not quite clear the species identification. That the quite a basic work still needed for some of the species, even in Mexico. So I pick up them as the interest on finding out more the scientific information in terms of reproductive biology. Change bit the subject, secondary diversity also the unique. So Phaseolus vulgaris, the being originated in the northern part of South America, like Venezuela, Colombia to Mesoamerica, and also Chile, this your new continent, and move to Africa. And they have only diversity change. Like you see the color of beans and also the bell-shaped type of the chili. And maize, obviously those are the origin in the Mexico down to Mesoamerica. And but maize move to Asia, like this case is Myanmar, maintain also the changes by their use locally. So the moving and the utilization provide also the unique, also the diversity changes depends on how people use. And also secondary diversity is not a second hand. Case of potatoes, a major potato origin in the South America, Bolivia, Peru, likely. But talking about the plant breeding, the aspect, so the potato has the fungal disease problem, late of blight. And late of blight, a major resistance source came from Mexico. Yet the Mexican source is the important the backup for potato late of blight resistance the breeding. So place to place, looking at the utilization, popular utilization, that will help also the genetic change. Anyway, looking over human history, a lot of crops are moved and they also utilized the one place to other. So I don't read over, but there are examples already I mentioned here. And also the crop supported civilizations. And you may look at the N.I. Babilov or Jack Haran books. And also the Japanese scholar in the past, the Sasuke Nakao proposed a similar context on how crops supported the civilizations and also the spread over the world. So this one just the illustration for your reference if you are interested in some of the opinion came out from Nakao. Moving to gene bank. Gene bank here is the backup over the genetic resources and can be the supply center for the seed stock. And the globally, maybe you count 1,700 gene banks at the international and national gene banks. Could be seed stock center or could be field the tree stand center. And also you make incorporate some of research botanical garden. Kew Botanical Garden in the United Kingdom. So around the 7 million accession according to like a CGRFA or FAOIT maintained out at those gene banks. So those are what the collection made, but particularly major proportion on like a seed propagated species. And the gene bank conservation, there are the field collection into gene bank, or the like on-farm materials into gene bank, or exchange between gene bank. Then the collections are maintained and evaluated and characterized. Sometimes for the specific purpose for supporting breeding and the information supplied. And the user can be here. I have more the research-oriented user listed, but the several steps are the need for gene bank. So what to conserve, what to collect, and genetic integrity in terms of information accumulation and information the supply. So the half is the material the aspect, the half is information the management. And also in terms of information management, it's not only the database, but also some of active publication, like the some of summary over the underutilized species. I have the summary case with the two gene bank collaboration with Myanmar and Pakistan. And the users, you've already seen like a breeder or researcher, and also the gene bank function can be extreme high. Like you see the Norway, Svalbard global seed bowl. This one is a long-term the conservation, like you may say frozen botanical garden. The other extreme side is my recent experience that Myanmar has the quite the vandalism problem and a lot of refugees out from country, especially to Thailand. And at the refugee camp, they don't have a crop to grow. So seed supplied from the Thai gene bank, this case, Kazuo University, local variety collected in Myanmar, supplied back to the refugee camp for let those people grow the original traditional crops. So case by case, gene bank function different, but the principally you see central part, the collection, conservation, documentation. Those are part are the key part for gene bank. Under the gene bank, I mentioned that the international gene bank, many of you have the exposure to CGR centers. They have the major contribution as the international gene bank. And also you see the Svalbard global seed bulb. But this Svalbard case is a seed the bank, not the vegetatively propagated species bank principally. So the gene bank the function different, and especially national gene bank the capacity the varies depends on how they are supported by the local government or local community. But the important part is that gene bank cannot be standalone. Even larger the international gene bank need to have collaboration. So CGR center cases they have the CGR system-wide gene bank the collaboration or to complement each other. Likewise, the national gene bank. So the domestic system gene bank, like in United States, you have the NGRP and also the National Plant, the Germplasm Resource Information Network. And actually, my career started at the Sturgeon Bay NRSP6 Potato Gene Bank, the research. And I continued working. This one too little to read over. But with many national gene bank, I've worked for particularly collection and also the some over the evaluation the activities. Gene bank the challenge, I would say, there are many, especially now because of many international laws and the domestic the requirement, access and benefit sharing, ABS facilitation, is one of the key the activities for many over the national gene bank. And also the gene bank need to store their genetic resources for long term. So long-term continuity in terms of resources, especially financial aspect and the stability in terms of the local security and also the local the safety. And this one is the Myanmar field gene bank of rice, and they try to rejuvenate the seed, but front side you see the patches that you don't see the plants don't grow. So the gene bank the often itself has a problem over the some over the loss over materials. It's not about the management, but sometimes because of property over accession or correction, it could happen. So always the gene bank also need to make the complementing their corrections. And also I mentioned that the collaboration important, and this case is that the Mexican collaborate with the North Americans and also the particularly Central American and the Caribbean nations for inter-Jinbank collaborations. Also, I mentioned about the seed aspects. And vegetatively propagated species need to have alternative approach. Maybe the stock growing field, tissue culture, or the cryoconservation. And the cryoconservation is one of the area over research still needed, especially recalcitrant species. They need to have specialized procedures. It's not only just the front side know-how, also backbone cryobiology science need to back up how to make effective the conservation of recalcitrant species like tropical trees. And talking about the stock you maintain in the bank, sometimes you may wonder what is the genetic the integrity and the genetic change. So mango, the example. So the mango is a tree and vegetatively propagated, like by the grafting. And the Myanmar case, there are several major varieties. They claim like a Matisse Saint Laurent, there is name. But within the name, actually genetic differentiation will take place. So the aspects is feature the plants or stand represent the genotype of the landrace or traditional variety. Then we made the sum over the local collection over field standard, look at the diversity over landrace, and actually 1, 2 landrace name has quite a genetic variation. You see here the structure analysis using SSL markers. So GenBank also need to have a research on what to conserve. So otherwise, you may have the incorrect direction over very narrow the stretch over diversity conserve. And the other aspect, this one right now ongoing on gingibrachy. This one is a curcuminoid, the one of the medical the attribute commonly used. And we have the accessions of one curcuma, the amada, which is the relative of curcuma longa, turmeric, and we look at the curcuminoid content. So it depends on the collection or accession, the quality variation of curcuminoid content and the spectrum of curcuminoid you see Z89 0.675 and Z23-1 almost nothing trace. So it depends on collection. The people claim that this species has a curcuminoid, but it is quite variable. So by varying this, there is the basic information and lead to the initial phase of plant breeding by selection. So the gene bank need a research capacity, not only conservation. Expedition. So I go 5 minutes on the expedition. Expedition or the human finding over the new plants is started from prehistoric, but enhanced at the age of discovery. And the past several hundred years ago, colonization started, and that one also the accelerated to find out the use of plant genetic resources. And yet the 20th century, because of the large scale the crop production, the plant hunters looked at the different accessions or the species. So actually botanists are the plant hunters. And you see names here in the past 300 years. And recent the activities, especially the 20th century, US had a lot of mission for collecting the crop genetic resources. Like the Frank Meyer, maybe they picked up in the plant breeding book in United States. And also in parallel, I mentioned already Babylon, Haran, Kihara, and Nakao. They have proposed the crop origin and the importance of those origin over crops association with the civilization. Two examples, medicine, how plants contributed. Some of classic example is the quinine, the finding, and it is yet the common malaria remedy, and also the artemisia. And also couple of the species are proven to be very effective for cancer remedy, like the vincaminol, the vinblastine, and the vincristine, and the Pacific yew, taxol. Although those are directly from plants, yet effective medicine used the cancer remedy. And obviously, science support Chinese traditional medicine and Ayurveda. So the although the finding out a new medicine at the present the modern society, but looking at the how plants contributed, it's a big contribution. Biomaterial. So you may go over the balance of the combustible energy and the recyclable energy. So plants can provide a reproducible industrial biomass. That how they are contributing could contribute more, a lot of potentials. But talking about the genetic resources, the human utilize, yet there are potential and more the possibility by introducing information or materials from one place to other. But since the 1960s, there is more and more coming up on national sovereignty rights on natural resources, including the genetic resources. So each country has a more protectionism rather than sharing genetic resources. So it is very difficult to get even for academic research material from one country into, like a case in Japan. So a lot of procedures I state here in the bottom. So, and also it could provide both the benefit and also the future potentials. So saying so about present the national ownership concern, yet the gene bank want to correct, depends on the gene bank mission and the user the requirement like a plant breeders or industry. Gene bank go to collection or exchange of material with other gene bank. But how to set up the planning, it is also associated with present the access possibility by legal regime, and also particularly COVID, but also the globally there are the instability in terms of the security and the variable the climate change. Those also affect for expeditions. So there are the preposition to look at the talking about expedition. And also factor you would have information is also important. Here you see Southeast Asian vegetable market having the some of cucurbitaceae, also non-cucurbitaceae. Here you see eggplant and lettuce. But looking at where they are originated, there are still the crops that would be introduced from the tropical zone to other places, temperate zones. So red color, I will show you photo at the last slide set here, that the cucurbitaceae, in case there are the three major origins. So depends on crops, the place to look at different, and also each country has a different policy and regulations on access topics. But anyway, the practice in the expedition, the past few years, it was very difficult to go around because of COVID. But these I made it, especially going to Myanmar area. And the very difficult mountain zone, and sometimes a conflict zone, having bombs the uncorrected. So this one, right bottom is a sign of they have a lot of the problems. But anyway, we couldn't make it and find out something new, like you see wild banana, which is deployed, have the viable seed and the likely species of Musa nagensium. And obviously, not only getting expedition, the permission, collection permission, germ plasma, transfer, material transfer agreement. Here you see the plant quarantine certificates. That is another thing that you need to prepare. So a lot of paperwork actually needed for expedition, the aspect. So those are the operational points that I summarize, and I hope you can review that the time is limited. But the important thing is that it's not done in the short time. Planning interactions, especially long-time interactions, to make a partnership building. And also, often we go to rural area, the villages where they have no prior experience with foreigners. So we are strangers, so we have to have a precaution over how to behave well with the collection. So it's not only Japan. I think it is a common the future that the expedition specialists are the endangered entity. That we need to have those people having botany knowledge, crop knowledge, and plant breeding knowledge, and also those of legal processes. And the also important part is we go often quite the distant location where we have difficulty. So mental preparation is often important. Quite unexpected things could happen. A car could be broken, you can expect. But an elephant come up and stop our car moving for one night. So I didn't expect. So sometimes those are the nature-bound problem may came up. And also place to place, this one is Kenya, and I'm required to ask escort by some of rangers to go in because of several reasons, maybe wild animal or poachers, and or some over the criminals. So the place to place, there is local rule to follow and the pay precaution. And often we go border zone, so the border zone requirement we have to follow. So it's not only direct the expedition permission, but also security permission sometimes needed to clear out. Then finally, I could reach to the center. You see the farming community between Thailand and Myanmar. So by expedition, we may learn a lot by looking at those of barnyard shifting field, how to utilize the species. And also there is in situ site like a wild rice the habitat back in my photo that they identify those locations as the on-site the conservation site besides the gene bank activities. And the important part is what to use, how to use. So looking at the seasonal, the different the time and the different location, how vegetables are used. So this one is not such thing. Actually, research that how vegetables are used in Southeast Asia. So expedition have a lot, and yet not only expedition by looking at the information, you may introduce new crops. This case is from South Africa. And flowers today I don't discuss, but there are also a lot of flower genetic resources available that could be future potential. Also, even wild grass here, by applying the modern science, especially biotechnology, this one accumulates salt. And the salt stress tolerance can be studied and incorporated by genetic engineering. So the more the potential by science help. So that's how I conclude with the last topics, that the genetic resource aspect has increasing the property right insists, national sovereignty right, especially covered by conventional biological diversity. So this one particularly because of generally speaking technology, biotechnology availability can change, including informatics. That's how modern flora changes that it is very difficult on access issues. And indeed, the past 30 years, there are a lot of discussion on biodiversity, especially genetic resources at a different place as the global basis. And especially SDG contain a component of biodiversity and change word to genetic resources. They have quite an emphasis. And I have summary over my experience participating in international convention negotiations, especially convention of biological diversity, but there are the FAO forum. CBD is more environment, and also the intellectual property coming with the varieties and the patent. So the WTO coming up, WIPO coming up. So different international forum discuss about the genetic resources. And that complicated how to use genetic resource newly available from other countries. So this one is a present forum, not easy to access and not easy to use genetic resources came newly from those over the other countries. So that's how not only knowing what is the botany and the genetic resources, legal aspect, also negotiation capacity. Those are the factors also important. That's how I proposed a decade ago, there is new type of specialists needed. And indeed, the specialist requires a more legal capacity. And this one, what I have done 5 years ago, to have first case with Mexico and the Convention of Biological Diversity to mobilize the Mexican crop genetic resources. This one is a chayote. So I'm also learning those of experience that are what to do with 21st century paradigm. So we can do a lot in scientific term, but we also need to look at the legal aspects. So I've been working with those of international negotiation, especially in the past United Nations University. Then I came up with the concept of biodiplomacy, that the biotechnology, biodiversity, genetic resource, those are the key factors for 21st century. It's not only the science, but also we have to look at the diplomacy and the legal aspect to utilize. So that's how I propose and working by diplomacy concept besides doing the biological research. So just a time, and I'd like to end. And this one is what I mentioned, snake goods. And the lady at the center is also Cornell graduate. Madam Ambassador of Indonesia, sent to Japan, and we evaluate the Southeast Asian tropical vegetable growth possibility in Japan, particularly Tsukuba. So around us are all the tropical vegetables. We can harvest even October. So unfortunately or fortunately, because of climate change, we can do like this at a temperature zone. Okay, thank you very much for your time, and I think I'm open to your comments and questions.
Thank you, Dr. Watanabe, for your lovely presentation today. I'd like to take a question, and the first question I hope will come from a graduate student, either in the room or online. Yes, Lucia.
Yes. I wanted to ask him about the modern.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I wanted to ask you about conserving pollen in the gene banks and about the location of the gene banks related to the species that they are collecting, if they should all be in the center of origin, and what happens with the species that have been not paid attention to. Thanks.
Your question have two components, right? You ask about the pollen, right?
Yes.
So I think it is limited because the viability of pollen changes species to species. So like a Solanaceae species, you make keep it for 6 months in freezer. But maybe the graminea, like rice pollen, can be the 1 day. So the that one is the area not much exploited. But usually those of the embryo, the case can be conserved. And talking about underutilized species, so it is recommended by different group, like one is CGIAR, FAO, that some over priority setting are given, but actually it's short-handed, my understanding, on covering many crops. So it's not only international effort, but the local effort more important that what to conserve in terms of their traditions and also documenting the information. Is that the way you have asked me question?
Yes. Thanks.
Yes, perfect.
Hi, I have a question about biopiracy. So United States where we are and Japan where you are, have been places that have not traditionally been opposed to biopiracy, or we probably wouldn't call it that. But do you think there's any shift in how the United States and Japan view that?
Yes, that's a good question. Biopiracy is a word made by the one international NGO, and it sounds very sensational. But the most of cases is a misappropriation of understanding of a procedure or misunderstanding of how to communicate in terms of the process of the access topics. And it is the coming to fairness in terms of like environmental ethics concept that probably would have another session over the environmental ethics. But you talk about the common sense over consideration to others. So the prior informed consent is important. Often it is missing. But also the country of origin often feels the loss sense of the something. So often it comes as the undigested uneasiness expressed as the biopiracy. So the many cases actually picked up as a biopiracy is the short-handed explanation on the side feature they acquired the genetic resources. That is the very general, but my understanding looking over Japanese case, the most of case like that.
Any other questions in the room? I'll just walk to you. Give you the microphone. Right. Follow-up question from Lucia.
What do you have to do if you want to donate material? Can you have just one plant or you need to have many of them?
So that is a good question. Actually, Gene Bank has a specification that they need to have the certain number of seeds, like 500 seeds, or maybe the 1,000 seeds, or the some of information should come with, like if you know the best shot of information here, they are from GPS data or the donors would be helpful. But the bare hand usually the gene bank has a difficulty to receive it. So instead of that, there is the local seed depository openly take place at the many countries instead of the full function gene bank, but a local community collection prefecture or state. Sometimes they take care of that, but there is no systematic requirement or specification indicated, my understanding.
Are there any questions from Geneva or elsewhere online in the world? You can either unmute and ask the question, or you can put it in chat and I can read it for you.
Yeah, indeed, the Geneva is a good place to visit as a representation of gene bank activities. PGR unit of ARS are there. and it's quite active, my understanding.
Very active. So I have a question for you. So you've worked in a few different countries. Are there any countries in particular who do not have a gene bank and that you think are at risk for not having a gene bank?
Many countries don't have a systematic gene bank function, and they have some effort locally by community or a national program. So indeed, the small country with a small budget, lack of human resources, often they have problem. Even the country where they have the national agriculture system and the so-called gene bank, looking at the entities they have, just conserved as the botanical stock, not as genetic resources. That means cannot reproduce. So I would say maybe the quite a large proportion of so-called nations, maybe you can count 200 nations, more than half would have a problem over their capacity in terms of how to conserve the genetic resources.
Great. Thank you for that answer. All right, so we're almost at the end of our time. Are we in your last minute or 2-minute questions from the room or even online? If not, let's thank the speaker one more time.
Thank you very much.
So thank you so much, because I realize it's after 2 a.m. there and you're probably pretty tired now. So thank you. But
It's
you,
okay. Once
think-
a week, I do so.
and I think you have more time to talk with people, right? Or
Yes, I'll open another channel right after this.
Right. Okay, good. And I think there was a question from Lee Cass for your email, and Lee, you can see the email in the last slide. Okay.
Yes, I communicated in the past with Lee on Barbara McClintock topics. I remember you. So should I close this?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a different Zoom link for when you meet with graduate students.
Yes, I'll close it. Okay, thank you. Thank you, and I hope I see you in future at Ithaca.
Hopefully soon, yes.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.